Whether it's cars, comics, video games, or violins, there's a little geek in all of us. It's time to give your geek a voice. It's time for Geek Therapy. Here's your host, Johnny Hemberger.
Holy moly. Holy moly. Welcome to Geek Therapy. I am Johnny Hemberger, and I am just sitting here, soaking it all in. I can't believe I'm on the air. I can't believe that this station has taken the supreme risk of giving this brain an hour to cover the airwaves. What were they thinking? Somebody up there must be a little bit of a geek. And that is actually the whole premise of this show. The show's called Geek Therapy. I'm a geek. I'm a geek about a lot of different things, but I have this theory, and we can call this perhaps the mission statement of the show. I believe that there's a little bit of geek in all of us, no matter your walk of life, no matter your background, no matter your economic status, no matter your age, no matter your race, your gender, your religion, anything. Everybody, I believe, is a little bit of a geek. So what am I a geek about? I'm a geek about computers. I'm a geek about astronomy and airplanes and NASA and technology. And I can geek out about anything. My mind wanders to so many things. Music, not just listening to music, but making music. You know, in the recording studio, microphones, monitors, all that stuff. That's honestly my background is as a recording engineer. And you can't be a recording engineer if you're not a big-time geek. So while I may be a geek about several different things, I believe that everyone's a geek. And you might be thinking to yourself, I'm not a geek. I don't have big, thick Coke bottle glasses like you, Johnny. I'm not super into computers. I'm not a programmer. I'm no good with a soldering iron. I don't even know what a soldering iron is. Well, guess what? You might be a geek about cars. I like cars. We're going to talk about cars a lot on this show. Cool cars. You know, we're not going to be talking about Toyota Camrys or Corollas or Honda Civics. No one cares about that, but we might get into Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Teslas and vehicle technology. So your geek thing might be muscle cars. And you might not think of yourself as a geek because you're into muscle cars. It's kind of a macho thing. But guess what? You are a geek. And your geek thing is muscle cars. Somebody else's geek thing might be vintage stereos. They might be super into tubes and amps, and they might just drool. They might just go on eBay and drool over vintage, Marantz amplifiers, vintage speakers. Anything. They might be true audiophiles. They might love vinyl records. We're going to talk about records a lot. I like records, but that's the geek thing. All these different labels we have for these geek interests. You know, a hipster isn't really. I mean, they are a hipster, but they geek out about music no one's heard. They might geek out about different coffee beans and coffee shops and different brews and blends of coffee. We'll talk about brewing coffee. Let's talk about that. Who cares? Anything interesting. Other people might have telescopes, and their geek thing might be the stars. I love the stars. I love space. I love looking out into space. It's a very romantic thing to me, and I don't just mean in the lovey-dovey arena. It's just very literally romantic in a literature sense to be looking out at the stars and wondering about our place in this universe. And a lot of people think that makes them feel like a speck, like they're insignificant, looking out into the stars. And it doesn't require a telescope. You know, even if you live in the city and we have lots of light pollution, if you just stop just on the street, and just look up, you can see a twinkling light out there. Does that make you feel small and insignificant? It doesn't make me feel small and insignificant. I look out there and get overwhelmed with this sense of purpose, of belonging. You know, there's no way I can look out there and see all these stars, which stars themselves on the grand scale of the universe are just specks of dust. I mean, literally, that's kind of what they are, is big clouds of dust and whatnot. It coagulates together and boom, you know, gravity takes over, fusion, we have a star. But there goes my geek brain again, going down the rabbit hole of how stars are made. Anyways, looking out at the stars, and you think there's got to be planets around them, and we've discovered there are planets around them, and there's no way we're alone. Some of those planets have to have life. So does that make me or you feel insignificant? No. It makes me feel like I belong. That somebody on a planet surrounding that star is looking back at our star, at my star, and wondering who's looking back at them. It's kind of this beautiful thing to think that we're all connected. And guess what? On that planet, there are geeks. And that might not be the term that they use, but they have gleep glorps on their planets. Gleep glorps who are super into their telescopes and microscopes and technology and their music playback systems and their vehicles, I'll just say. They might not burn, you know, extinct animals in their vehicles like we do, but they still have cool vehicles they geek out about over there. They have sports that they could gleep glorp out about. And if this first segment hasn't given you a little taste of what this show is about, just being a geek and loving being a geek about your particular geekdom, that's what we're about. And I want you guys to tell me what your geek thing is, and we will explore it. You know, I'm super into computers and whatnot, but that doesn't make me an expert on computers. I grew up with Apple IIs and Commodore 64s, 386, 486, Pentium 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, Core 2, do it all the way up. I love building computers, putting graphics cards in there, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be the expert on it. I'm here to learn with you guys. What is the point of living on this great big world, in this great big universe, if we're not learning? I don't want to be the end-all be-all expert in any subject, because I want to keep learning. That's what it's all about, and that's what gives me goosebumps right now as I'm talking about it, is that pursuit of knowledge, learning new things. It's so great. It's so great, and I want you guys to come along with me and enjoy the journey. Enjoy learning about other people's geekdoms. Let's go on this journey together. I'm Johnny Hemberger. Stick around. There's plenty more Geek Therapy to come. We're going to have a good time. Stay right here.
Get down.
Welcome back to Geek Therapy. I am still Johnny Hemberger, I think. Let me check what it says on my underpants real quick. Yep, Johnny Hemberger. Well, says JH. Other people in that I know share the initials of JH, so I'm going to go for it. I'm going to wing it on the underpants department. I'm going to just say that these are mine. I don't know where the little pink flowers came from, but I digress. They're mine now, because the other person definitely, holy crap, doesn't want them back. Let me get on to actual geek topics. You know, in the last segment, we established what this show is about. So in this inaugural show, I believe I will spend this second segment telling you my background, where I came from, what makes me a geek? Like, how did I fall into this moniker that I wear proudly of being a geek? I was born in the early 80s. I was born in 1983. So that makes me an 80s baby. You know, you see on the internet these youths talking about all the best things of the 90s. Son, you were born in 1997. You do not know what the best of the 90s were. I was 7 years old in 1990. I was 8 years old when the Super Nintendo came to the United States in 1991. I was forged by the fires of technology. And here's an interesting thing. My generation, the 30-somethings, and I thank God for this, we were kind of the last generation to grow up before this all-consuming world of the internet and cell phones and interconnectivity. We used to still, even though we had Nintendos and everything, if we wanted to seek the company of another human being, we had to get our butts on a bike or just on our feet and walk around the neighborhood, knocking on doors. Is Jimmy home? And we would play baseball out in the street. Nobody had cell phones. Parents just said, come home when the street lights come on. And actually, I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here a little bit because I think it's awesome. I think it's hilarious and I think it's awesome. Before we moved to Houston, to our neck of the woods in North Houston, my mom did the research. And I'll set this up a little bit about my mom first. She's a saint, but she's cool, and she used to be a hippie, and she built us skateboard ramps. We had a half pipe. My mom built us a half pipe in our backyard when we lived in San Antonio. So my mom's kind of a cool mom. So before we moved to the north side of Houston, she did the research to find out what the most dangerous flora and fauna were around us, within 20 miles around us or whatever. She figured out that a water moccasin or copperhead, whatever, was the most dangerous animal in the piney woods of East Texas, the northeast side of Houston. And apparently, if you get bitten by a cottonmouth, you have 3 hours, if you're a child, you have 3 hours to get to the hospital and get the antidote. So my mom figured, we're not on our bikes and on our shoes, we're not going to get more than 3 hours radius away from home. So she said, go out, have fun. Go explore, go be kids. We can have all the video games, not all the video games we want. We had all the video games we ever needed, though. We were never in want. Well, we were in want of video games, but we had plenty of video games. We had that stack of NES games and Super Nintendo games. You know when you have so many games that you're bored, that you're like, we have too many to even figure out what to play? That's kind of what we were. And it wasn't every game in the universe, but it was a stack of like 15 or 20 games. And anyways, my mom wanted us to get outside, and she knew that the worst thing that could happen to us was, as far as an animal is concerned, was that we could get bit by a snake, a copperhead, and have 3 hours to get home. So she just said, go out, have fun. If you get bit by a snake, come right home. You should still be able to pump your bicycle. Not really, but somebody could get us home. Somebody could run home. We can find us. We can get to the hospital, get to the antidote in time. So that's kind of the times that I grew up. I think maybe we were the last generation to enjoy such freedoms. So growing up, being born in 1983 means that my generation truly got to enjoy the best of the 90s as kids. Everything cool in the 90s was marketed towards us. Me and my dumb little friends were willful casualties, willing casualties of the bit wars. 8-bit versus 16-bit, 16-bit versus 32-bit, 32-bit versus 64-bit, and after 64 they stopped really caring about the bits. They stopped advertising the bits of each system. But that's when tech was cool. That's when technology was cool. I remember when we bought Super Mario Brothers 2 in 1988. I remember piling in the station wagon, the Oldsmobile station wagon that we had, the shaggin' wagon, and going to Target or something to go get Super Mario Brothers 2 in 1988, me and my 3 brothers. I remember being excited and bummed because I knew we were going to get this awesome new game, but I wasn't going to get to play it because my 2 older brothers were going to hog it. I thought I was going to be an old man before I ever got to actually play Super Mario Brothers 2. So we got Super Mario Brothers 2, popped it in the NES, and I remember being blown away just as a little 5-year-old boy at the graphics It looked so amazing. And the same thing happened when Super Nintendo came out. First time seeing Super Mario World and thinking, there's no way graphics will ever get better than this. And they just kept getting better. I remember playing GoldenEye on the N64 and seeing the faces, the crude texture files they used for the faces in GoldenEye, and thinking, we can see their faces. How in the world is this possible? This is real life now. And then in 2002, when the PS2 came out, I was in high school. I didn't have a cell phone yet. Actually, I got a cell phone in 2002. But 2002 or 2001, playing PS2, we were playing a hockey game. And the characters in the game, the athletes, the players in the game were so lifelike. Again, we said, there's no way graphics will become better than this. Now we've become so desensitized. And video game makers know that, or they rest on the laurels of these great graphics and great physics engines and stuff like that. Meanwhile, the games suck. Meanwhile, you turn on your PlayStation and you have to wait for a firmware download, a software patch. You can't just blow in the cartridge anymore and play the freaking game. That was our worst dilemma as kids. It wasn't waiting around for firmware updates, software updates. It was got to blow in the cartridge. You have to engage in the sacred ritual of black magic to get Super Mario Brothers to work. That was our biggest problem. Now it's become so mundane and just such a. I get almost depressed thinking about the current state of video games. I paid $100 of my own money to pre-order Street Fighter V. And then when it got released around this time last year, it was broken and unplayable. I spent $100 to get the game plus all the download content because I'm a huge Street Fighter nerd. A huge Street Fighter nerd. And I was stoked for Street Fighter V. $100 later, downloaded that huge file off of Steam, which Steam is awesome in itself, but downloaded the game, and it didn't work. They basically released the beta version as the launch. And that's just... never fool me once. I'm never buying a pre-order again. Back in the day, the cartridges were the final release. Well, by and large, by the time it made it onto the cart, that was it. No more firmware updates, no more waiting around, no more broken games. Whatever little glitches existed at that point, that's just part of the game. I'll use Mario Kart as the case in point. Mario Kart has loads of known glitches that make the game really fun. Now games come out and they're just broken. So you've made it through segment 2 of the first show. How are you liking it so far? We are just itching our nerd brains here. That's what the show's going to be about. Coming up in the next segment, we'll have more topical things to talk about. We'll get into it a little better, perhaps. But stick around. It's going to be fun. We are just starting. Well, we're at the halfway point now of Geek Therapy. Stick around. There's plenty more of Geek Therapy to come.
Doing it right, everybody will be dancing and we're feeling it right. Everybody will be dancing and be doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and we're feeling alright. Everybody will be dancing tonight, doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and we're feeling it right. Everybody will be dancing and be doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and we're feeling alright. Everybody will be dancing tonight.
This is my microphone. These are my airwaves for the next 30 minutes or so. And I'm going to use that time to geek out. Let me tell you another reason I'm a geek. I love Back to the Future. Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. My older brothers, who are slightly older than me, their generation, Gen X, maybe generations before that, it's all about Star Wars. And I like Star Wars, but I'm not a certified geek in Star Wars. We're going to talk about Star Wars a lot on this show. I'll have guests in here who are turbo nerds with Star Wars. But my movie growing up was Back to the Future. And let me tell you what a geek I am about Back to the Future. When I learned that the time machine was based on an actual car that exists, it blew my little nerd brain. When I found out that the DeLorean was a real car, I made it a mission in my tiny little life that one day I would have that car. And one day, in July of 2000, I sold a lot of Subway sandwiches because I worked at Subway. This was before Jared happened. Sold a lot of Subway sandwiches, and in July 2000, I got a 1983 DMC-12. I have a DeLorean. I daily drove that DeLorean. I delivered pizza in that DeLorean. Of course, I still have it. I've had it now for going on 17 years, and I still drive it all the time. It's not my daily driver anymore, but I take it out very frequently. I take it out very frequently. I love driving it. My daily driver, I won't say what my daily driver is, but it will wipe the floor with the DeLorean 100-fold. As a vehicle, it is 1,000 times superior to the DeLorean, which if you know any of the myth and folklore about the DeLorean, it wasn't the fastest car in the world, but it doesn't need to be. It's a DeLorean. It wins just showing up. So I drive a DeLorean around. I'm that guy, you see, driving the DeLorean around. And after about the 500,000th flux capacitor joke, I ordered a flux capacitor off of Amazon. It's a phone charger. It plugs into the cigarette lighter and has 2 USB jacks on it, and it charges your phone. But there's a little button on the side of it that you press to make the flux capacitor start fluxing. It's got little LEDs that blink and flash, and you're getting ready to go back in time. So I just rolled with that joke, and I knew getting that car that I was in for a world of hurt with the Back to the Future jokes. Every time, I was going to say it happens a lot, every single time I take out the DeLorean, somebody at least once, even just going a couple miles to the gas station, somebody at an intersection is going to yell, "Marty!" So I've been called Marty so many times. And the reason I love that car, not just because I'm a geek, but I love it mostly for the joy it brings to other people of all ages and walks of life. It's funny to me that kids, they might be 7 years old in a minivan next to me, looking over at the car, pointing and waving and everything like that. And how do these kids know what the DeLorean is? And it has to be because their parents, who are my age, have rightfully so raised them watching Back to the Future. So these kids could care less about, $100,000 Mercedes. Unfazed. They won't even recognize it. But a DeLorean is bigger than life. And they recognize it, and I like, it depending on what street I'm on and how fast I'm going, I'll flap the door for them. It blows their nerd minds. They don't know they're nerds yet, but I just made them nerds. So I love sharing that joy with not just the kids, but people who've grown up with that movie, and seeing that car in real life to them is like a movie star, meeting a movie star. And I still look in the garage and think, holy crap, that's a DeLorean. I've had it for 17 years. That part of the coolness has not worn off. I will go and open the garage door and just be like, what the crap is that? I can't believe that that's sitting there in the garage. And now, when I was 17, I did have the presence of mind to know that it would be a good investment. When I bought the car, it was, I'm not going to give the price, but it cost less than a used Honda Civic. The dealership thought it was broken. There was a huge oil spot under the front of the car. But I knew the engine's in the back, the oil pan's in the back. So that oil spot was not from the DeLorean. But I didn't tell anybody, because I wanted other potential buyers to see the big oil spot and think it was a lemon and not want to touch it. So I knew the engine was in the back. I knew that wasn't the DeLorean's oil spot. So they thought it was broken. So we bought it for a price that assumed it needed work, and it needed a little bit of work. But anyways, I put in a 50-cent engine control fuse and jump-started the battery and drove it home. And it's been driving ever since. I cleaned the fuel system. Well, I didn't clean it myself. I brought it to the guys in Humble, DeLorean Motor Company in Humble, and had them redo the fuel system. Any car that's been sitting, whether it's a Honda or a DeLorean, if it's been sitting for years, it will need the fuel system cleaned out or replaced. Doesn't matter the vehicle. So, if scooting around this city in a 1983 DeLorean DMC-12 doesn't qualify me as a nerd, I really don't know what will. Actually, I take that back. I know there's another thing that qualifies me. Several years ago, I remember being on the internet looking around for local arcades, in the few that exist. If anybody had a Street Fighter 4 machine. I had Street Fighter 4 on Xbox 360, but I wanted to see if I could go to an arcade and actually play against another human being shoulder to shoulder, like we grew up with. So I think there was one machine at that time in the city, but it dawned on me, why don't I build my own Street Fighter 4 arcade machine? So that's what I did. I went on Craigslist and I found an old Konami arcade cabinet that had been gutted. It wasn't in the greatest shape. There's still a few little electronics inside, but the PCB boards and all that stuff had been taken out. It was gutted. So I retrofitted a PC into it. I put the motherboard up behind the marquee and everything and put Steam on it and a bunch of emulators, which for legally gray reasons I won't go into. But I made myself an arcade machine that I could play Street Fighter on, Ninja Turtles, all that stuff. And that's the product of a geek brain. That's a product of your geek brain. You see a problem and you think of other ways to solve it. Like I said, there aren't any Street Fighter 4 machines near me in this city. Light bulb, I'll just make my own. And that's how I made my arcade machine. And any dude building his own arcade machine is a geek. So what's your geek thing? What problem in your life has your geek brain come up with a solution to? There are probably many things. And you probably weren't thinking, I'm a geek for going about it this way. But you were. It's 2017. Geek is not a negative thing in 2017. Guess what? In 2017, geeks are sexy. Welcome back to Geek Therapy. I am Johnny Hemberger, your mental curator for the evening. And in this final segment for this week, I want to cover a couple of things that have really tweaked my geek bone in the past week or so. It's a couple of stories that I just find truly fascinating. And I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to get into it. The first story... hold on a second. Let me just stop for 1 second. Do you ever start talking and then you have this, like, you feel this burp coming on or something, like something goes way up your esophagus and you feel like you don't know what's about to happen. So you're just talking like, that's what just happened to me. That's a little behind the scenes look into geek therapy. So let me get back on track. A couple of kids. A couple of kids. It's not a couple of kids. It's a group of college students came up with a funny idea that at the time was just a funny thought, but has now become an actual thing that's actually happening. This group of UC San Diego students is going to try to brew beer on the moon. This is a topic that James Simpson with What's on Tap Radio could cover. But guess what? I'm covering it first on Geek Therapy. These UC San Diego college students are going to brew beer on the moon. And that's kind of funny to me. I'll get into what they're actually doing in the actual protocol and specifics of what they're doing. But it's funny to me. My first thought when I heard of this story is, Elon Musk has these grand designs and ideas that will use SpaceX to eventually build a moon base. And I agree with that. Honestly, it's my opinion that maybe before we go to Mars, we should build a moon base, perhaps. Maybe that's not the best course of action, but I think while we're talking about going to Mars, we should also be really talking about building a base on the moon. It'd be way more cost effective in the long run. Building it sure isn't going to be cost effective, but in the long run, it would be more cost effective to launch the last leg of the Mars trips from the surface of the moon, where it's only a fraction of the gravity of Earth. So we can have a moon base up there where we just keep fuel, and be able to use a fraction of the fuel to launch off the moon and use this slingshot effect of the moon to get us to Mars quicker and more efficiently. So that just got me thinking about this brewing beer on the moon story. Is the first thing we're going to build on the moon a brewery? Is the first stop on our way to Mars going to be the pub? I wouldn't argue it. If I'm going on a trip and they're just like, this is the last booze you're going to be able to have over the next 6 months or however long it takes to get to Mars, yeah, I'm going to party like it's 2099. It's going to be one hell of a hangover to start that 6-month road trip to Mars. But it's actually true. These students are actually going to brew beer on the moon. They're going to put their little device, their micro brewery, onto a satellite, and amongst a bunch of other cargo. It's not just their brewery going up. It's a lot of other experiments. Theirs is one of them. So what it is it's this little. It's about the size of a soda can, and it has 3 different segments. And all blah, 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 all it's designed to do is they're going to land this capsule of yeast and oxygen and barley, and the beer is kind of pre-made, the actual beer. So that all they're really hoping to glean from this is the fermentation process on the moon. So it's not just about, can we brew beer on the moon? They're going to study the fermentation process on the moon, because we need to understand the fermentation process if we're going to do things on the moon like make bread, make food. I don't think the only diet on the moon should be unleavened bread and grits and whatever else we used to eat before we figured out what yeast does. So it's actually very smart what they're doing, and it's actually going to reveal lots of very useful information. So that's really cool. Someone asked me a few days ago, would I drink the beer that they brew on the moon? And at first, I was thinking, heck no. That's going to taste like garbage. That's going to taste like garbage. But then it dawned on me, I would be the first human being to drink moon beer. So of course I would take a drink. You wouldn't have to pay me to. Get that little canister back on Earth and I will shotgun it. That's how eagerly I will be the first to drink moon beer. I will shotgun that mofo and smash that capsule against my head, even though it's not really a little aluminum soda can. It looks like if I actually smacked it against my head, there would be no more Geek Therapy. You would read in the newspaper about the host of Geek Therapy bludgeons himself to death drinking moon beer. What a way to go. What a dumb funeral that would be for my friends to attend. What would they say about me? What would my obit say? Just make it truthful, make it real. Johnny Hemberger was a moron who smashed himself in the head with a heavy steel canister, and here we are. Who does he bequeath Geek Therapy to? Nobody. I'm taking it with me, and I'm doing it from the other side of the grave. I wonder if they have microphones in heaven. I think they probably do. So next thing we're going to get into is, it's along the same lines. SpaceX plans to send 2 people past the moon. Not in 2025, not in 2030. Next year, 2018. And here is why it got my little nerd bone vibrating. My little nerd antennas are going nuts right now, like a cockroach in the pantry got into the sugar cubes. It's just going nuts. These 2 people are not astronauts. They are civilians. And that is concerning and funny to me and scary, because astronauts are trained to deal with the stresses of space. And I'm not assuming that these 2 civilians won't undergo severe amounts of training between now and next year. They will have to. But the fact remains, they are civilians. To add to that, it's not just one person tumbling around in a trash can on their way past the moon and back. It's 2 people. So while one of them, well, let's put you in there. Let's put you and your girlfriend. Let's put you and your girlfriend or you and your wife in that little shoebox floating through space. One of you might freak out. Death wouldn't be the biggest of my fears. It will be shoulder to shoulder in a little, basically Cessna 150 hurtling towards the moon, out in the middle of literally nowhere. It's you, shoulder to shoulder, with your significant other. One of you is probably going to freak out. And it's not like, and I'm not just talking like an argument, and even if it was just a little argument, it's not like you could retire, one of you could just retire to the bedroom or go to the study or go to another room to diffuse the situation. If she checks your phone in that little space capsule and she finds something stupid, idiotic that you've been up to, it gonna get real quick. And you're going to be reaching probably for that little cyanide pill. Which, on that subject, I guarantee you there will be such a pill somewhere in some drawer in that space capsule. If something starts going wrong, not your girlfriend slapping you, but if something starts going really wrong, you know, it's go out peacefully before you crash into the surface of the sun or, you know, burn alive. Of course they're going to have a little take the shortcut button. That's a little bit morbid to think about. Let's get back to the subject. You're sitting there next to your spouse. You've done something wrong, and now you're trapped hundreds of miles hundreds of thousands of miles away from Earth. You can't just diffuse the situation. You got to come clean in that little flying shoebox. And on that note, that's the end of Geek Therapy for this week. Think about your actions. Everybody, on a real note, somebody loves you. If you're feeling down, somebody loves you, and you are worthy and capable of great things. So don't ever get yourself down, especially if you're a geek. If you're a geek, I love you. We love you. Somebody loves you. So take that with you this week. I'm Johnny Hemberger, and you've been listening to Geek Therapy.